So why data? China.
China.
Cat.
Why not?
Flower. Why thank you.
The end of the world.
I'm sorry.
That's why. Dada represents non-representation, or rather representation of randomness, of why not.
It was like the pioneer movement of just pushing boundaries and trying things that don't make sense and don't have meaning. I was interested in working with someone who wanted to make classical music, and I knew that Taylor would be willing to go down that road with me. So one of my hard ideas that I was not willing to budge on was it's going to be classical music, it's going to be atonal. I knew I wanted a choir because my background is as a choral singer.
Yeah, my one hard rule was all recorded audio. No synthesizers, no samplers, none of that. Anything.
So much work.
Yeah. Anything that was going to make it into the film score, we had to write that and have someone perform it and record it with a microphone.
So in terms of the composition, there was, the pre-planning for the composition. Then there was just actually creating the music, writing the music. There was creating written versions, digitally, that our musicians could read. There was contacting and scheduling all the musicians, prepping all of the Pro Tools sessions and things like that.
It presented its own challenges, writing music for something that's mostly non-narrative, because you want to include some aspects of what's going on in the film in any film score. You actually need to time your hits to correspond with the actions of the movie. And usually you would want to flow with the emotional content of the film, which in this case we were sort of driving the emotional content, or sort of choosing it. And this is the first situation in which I've been involved in a project where the music was the front seat for the film, as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, I mean, especially since, Richter, this film was made almost 100 years ago, 90 years ago, I guess. It's like, we're not going to get his feedback, and he's not the one who's contracted us to write this music. We get to kind of play around with our own ideas. We created a tone row, influenced by the idea of a Dada poem, which is where you take a piece of, like an article or something like that, and you cut up the words and you rearrange them in a random order, and that becomes the Dada poem. So we took that idea into atonal serialism, and we basically, which is when you have each pitch in a 12 pitch sequence represented, and we pulled them in random order, and that was kind of the basic musical idea.
When Monica and I first began playing around on piano, trying to scope out some ideas for this project, we were really just testing the waters, seeing what sort of vibes might work. We didn't actually use any of it, but it was still important to the compositional process just to, get our feet wet and, see how we're going to interact, see what sort of things we want to be jarring, some things that we want to be soothing.
Yeah, and interacting with the material, because that was still the beginning of our interaction with the film, and so it was a discovery period.
We wanted to create a graphic representation of film study in order to flesh out our ideas, make it visually all laid out in front of us to try and get some cohesive musical idea for the whole thing.
We came up with names for each of the sections that we recorded. So, when does rectangles happen? Does rectangles happen after eyeballs, or what's going on with that? And just to give ourselves a visual representation that kind of recalls some of the earlier Richter visual art. It was easier for us to see the linear progression of the film.
What we ended up going with was, I wanted strings, because strings are awesome. and I enjoy writing for strings. Monica wanted choir because she's a singer, she's involved in choruses, and she wanted to write some music for that. We decided on a horn section because we have friends who play horns. We actually we recorded a band called Salt People that has a whole horn section. So we utilized them plus my saxophone player from my band. So our choice of instruments for each section was definitely linked to the action in the film. For example, during Sunrise, we had the trombone solo slowly sliding in such a way that, you know, the sun slides through the sky. We had certain sections of the song, one of the climaxes where there's a hammer hitting and there's hard percussive hits on those hammer hits. As far as music goes, our music is influenced by Dada, but we weren't attempting to make something purely Dada. I mean, we were definitely borrowing heavily from the tradition of serialistic atonalism, which is not necessarily tied to the Dada movement. So our aspects of composition, such as the choosing of the tone row based on the Dada poem technique, that ties it to Dada. We used Dada as sort of an intellectual influence on us, but I would not say that we were creating a Dada piece of music. We were doing a Dada-influenced piece of music in the tradition of atonal serialism.
That is like one of the bigger projects that I've worked on, because it was just the two of us to have to take on those elements. I think it was really cool to experience that and what it takes and find out what exactly does it take to orchestrate something of this magnitude.
Monica and I definitely grew closer through this experience. I mean, anytime you're going to spend that much time working with another person, you're going to grow very close with them.
Or hate each other by the end.
True. There's probably a little bit of each, but mostly love.
Mostly love.
Mostly love. And on the recording days, those were extraordinarily physically and emotionally taxing for both of us. It was just so much work, so little rest.
By working together, we sort of understand more about each other's idiosyncrasies. Like, were we to work together again, we would have a better idea about each other's processes, about our quirks and stuff like that, and like what our strengths and weaknesses are. All of that is sort of built. You don't know it until you do it, and it's a building process.
That's actually